Hello, welcome to the Talking Michigan Transportation Podcast. I'm Jeff Cranston. On this Earth Day 2026, I spoke with Amanda Novak, who has made other appearances on the podcast. She is a resource specialist at the Michigan Department of Transportation, and she's working on some really creative things that both do a lot in terms of sustainability, but also to enhance safety of travel, especially the grant she has pursued in partnership with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources for wildlife crossings and ways to reduce collisions between vehicles and wildlife, any deer, bears, smaller animals, turtles, everything. And she's got a lot of good things to say about where it stands with that grant to study it and where things will go from there. And she also talks about the expansion of wildlife plantings, both for pollinators and for aesthetics, and trees, and what MDOT is doing with replacement and planting of trees that are both also helpful as pollinators into the species that pollinate, but to providing oxygen, which is something that matters to all of us. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. So, Amanda, thank you again for appearing on a Earth Day episode of Talking Michigan Transportation. I always enjoy talking to you about all the things that you're doing and your passion. You and many others at MDOT. I don't want to make it sound like it's a one-person show. You've got a lot of support in the central office and the other regions. But I'm specifically interested in catching up first on the grant to study better ways to protect wildlife and motorists from each other. This isn't just about protecting the animals. Obviously, that's part of our mission. But as we've talked about a lot, these crashes with wildlife that are happening with more frequency, as we know, fewer people are hunting deer, have a tremendous impact on the safety, and the cost of driving in Michigan. So can you tell us where we're at with that?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to report we're making excellent progress. We actually screened proposals last Friday on April 17th. And so the next step is to work through some contracting things, and then it is scheduled to go to the administrative board on May 12th. And then hopefully it'll be approved there, and then we'll get the kickoff meeting underway. So
that's the administrative board, I should say. It's a board that all the state agencies go to with proposals for contracts, and they have to sign off on it. So
yes, yep. So we're making progress on that. We're excited. We had a lot of really great proposals and a lot of great interest in this study. So that was really nice to see, and a lot of great work being done nationally, and folks that had worked on some of those national projects as well.
So with some changes at the federal level, different administrations, different priorities looking at things, this got held up a bit. These things are always fits and starts, right? But what have you learned along the way so far about, what this could be and what the potential is?
I have been able to reach out to some other DOTs who have similar projects going on right now, which was exciting. And actually, one of them in particular found me based on your past podcast that we did together.
Wow.
So
nice.
Yeah, that was exciting. And so I was able to connect with some other DOTs and discuss kind of like what went well so far with their grant projects and maybe some things I might be able to do differently. So that's pretty exciting. But I guess that's about it as of now, because we haven't really started anything. So I haven't learned too much yet.
But I'm guessing some of these are Western states. I spoke before with somebody from Alberta, which is a Western province, about the Y2Y, which is the Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative, where they've been working on this for a long time and done some very successful things. And Western freeways in Canada. So is it some of the Western U.S. states that you've been in touch with?
Yes, I've talked to folks from Montana, but most recently, actually Missouri DOT, and they're much more similar to us with their white-tailed deer issues.
Okay.
So they've been a great resource. They've actually reached the point where they've went through kind of the planning process, and now they're starting to figure out how to implement the data they've gained from the planning grant into their future planning. So I think that'll be really interesting to see how they work through that. And I'm sure there will be some parts in the process we can use as well.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that about the white-tailed deer, but it makes sense because the state geographically has a lot of similarities to Michigan. It's very diverse. Parts of it are very flat and just rural farmland, and obviously there's mountains in the south and all kinds of lakes in Missouri too. So that's really, really interesting. What would you say, what's the most tangible thing you've heard about that actually works to curtail these crashes?
Well, it's just getting the data back and really doing the risk analysis by corridor. I think that's really important. For us, it's going to be, it's great that we're going to identify the hot spots, but I think it's also going to be a corridor approach. How do we manage the entire corridor for the issue? Because it's really not going to stay isolated to one location. And so they're looking at it in that regard. And then kind of looking at how they're going to fit it into future project planning. And I guess my goal too would be as we create road projects, we start thinking about, we would automatically check that risk layer and maybe start talking about mitigation efforts during that planning phase.
Yeah, I think one question you hear from people is, why can't we just fence off all of the freeways and, talk about why that's just not practical.
Well, it's really expensive. But it may be something that we have to do long term in certain areas. But you have to have other factors included. You have to have a way for them to cross. We still have to maintain the habitat connection. The wildlife fences are very species specific, so they're not going to solve the issue of climbing animals, like bears, for example, can climb the fences. So if you have a bear issue, that's not really a practical mitigation measure. But we also want to look at it where we're including other species as well, not just solving the collisions with the larger animals, but also mitigating for some of the issues for the smaller animals like the herps that go unreported, the turtles and things like that. So
yeah, talk a little bit about that. We've talked about it before, but for the uninitiated, people think, well, turtles are small, how much damage can they do? But there's a reason why they present a safety concern too. And
yes,
that's because people want to help them.
Probably one of the biggest reasons is people want to help them. Yes, we get the motorists, who leave their vehicles and try to move the turtles. But there are the bigger turtles that when vehicles hit them, they do vehicle damage as well. So there's a mix there. But turtle fencing is another thing that Missouri, just providing safe passage for the smaller animals was important to Missouri as well. So they have some mitigation measures that I've been looking into. And we have the wildlife fencing for the turtles that we've actually found a product that's actually made in the U.S. because I guess another lesson learned for me with the turtle fencing is that some of the fencing products out there don't meet the Buy America standards, which were held to at MDOT federally.
Yes, very important.
So that was an interesting lesson learned.
Yeah, well, no, that's okay. I wanted to touch on just quickly again because we've talked about it before, but you hear from the naysayers, the critics, the armchair engineers, like, how can you're trying to teach the deer where to cross? And it's like, well, yeah, actually we are. That's it. It has been done successfully. They are somewhat trainable, right? And you can do things that they'll teach those animals, which they've done with great success in Western Canada, to funnel them to these safe crossings.
Yes, we will be funneling them. We have a few culvert locations in our current fencing project. I guess an update to that as well is it's part of the Transportation Alternatives Program. It's a pilot project, and we are going to put in some wildlife exclusionary fencing to keep the deer out of the right of way. And so we're going to learn a lot through that process, which measures work. But we're funneling them to big box culvert crossings. So we are going to encourage their crossing in a safe spot.
Can you talk a little bit about what some of those hot spots are around the state? You might be most familiar with the Bay region where you are, but you probably know of others.
Yeah, I see a lot of them. I've done a fair amount of carcass collection, so noting actual carcass locations on a GIS map, and I start to see some definite trends with it. They like to cross where our structures are. They really utilize our interchanges and our bridges, and you'll see really concentrated hits in those locations. And generally speaking, they have some kind of drainage feature nearby where we see a lot of crashes. So I think it makes sense to funnel them to some of those areas because they're obviously drawn there. So if we can funnel and help them with safe passage, I think it can be laid out and planned out.
So you had an interest in this, obviously, in your college years, but did you ever know that you would be involved in animal carcass collection?
I did not expect to be doing this. No. It's interesting and exciting, especially when you see trends over a few years to see, I'm marking deer in the same location I've marked, like nearly the same exact location I've marked for the last couple of years in a row. So it starts to really show there are trends. I know everybody thinks it's completely random, but I don't think it's entirely random.
Yeah, well, I mean, for some time, we've known at least a little bit about hot spots, and that's why the signs go where they do, because that's a common crossing spot. And what I find myself trying to do, if I'm in a rural area especially, is I keep an eye on Waze or Google Maps or whatever. I try to look for bodies of water that I'm coming up on, because that's going to be an indicator of where they might be trying to cross.
Yes, definitely an indicator, or low ground, where you have kind of like wetland adjacent. It's a definite crossing spot as well. Or folks' hayfields, at my house, they cross at the end of our hayfield and people hit them there all the time.
Yeah, including you, right?
Yes.
Please stay tuned. We'll be back with more Talking Michigan Transportation right after this.
In Michigan, safety comes first on the roads. To combat distracted driving, Michigan passed the hands-free law.
The law makes holding or manually using a cell phone or other mobile electronic device while operating a vehicle a primary offense. This means an officer can stop and ticket you for violating the law.
This can include, but not limited to, sending or receiving a call, sending, receiving, or reading a text or email, accessing, reading, or posting to social media sites, or entering locations into the phone GPS.
With this law in place, drivers are encouraged to stay focused, keeping their hands on the wheel and their attention on the road. Drive smart, drive safe, drive hands-free.
Michigan's hands-free law, making the road safer for everyone.
You've been an advocate for a long time for wildflower seeding. We've talked about sunflowers and pollinators. So touch on that, bring me up to speed on where things stand there.
Yeah, so this year, I haven't talked to everybody statewide, but I believe we're on track to plant what we planted last year as far as sunflowers and wildflower plots. I think in our region, we expanded a little bit. We are planting in Bay Region 16.5 total acres, which is really exciting. But I think everything else will remain pretty much the same. We may have expanded a little bit in the other regions, but everybody's for the most part coming on board and at least putting some kind of plantings in their regions.
16 acres, are you talking medians mostly, linear acres?
We have several median, yes, we have them in the medians. We have some loop ramps. And then we have some wildflower plots at the Port Huron Welcome Center, which has actually helped us reduce total mowing costs of the turf at the rest area or the Welcome Center, which is also really exciting. It looks beautiful all year, from the start of the spring into the fall. It supports so many different types of pollinators and then also reduces our mowing costs. So it's been a really great project, and we've expanded that again this year.
So you've told me before, and I don't think we need to get into the numbers, but it sounds like the success in the Bay region with some of these has sparked interest in other regions around the state. So could you talk about where else this is going on?
Yeah, this is Grand Region, and I don't know all the roadways that we've planted, but similar planting locations, medians or loop ramps for Grand Region. Southwest Region joined us. They're also doing they obtained a grant for a different kind of like native wildflower planting. I believe they planted last fall, so I don't think we have results of how that turned out yet, but that's exciting. That's a pretty large area. It was like an excess parcel MDOT has. And I think university is joining, so that's exciting. So everybody's coming on board with the project.
Yeah, well, that covers a lot of ground from a square miles if you have those 4 regions involved. So that's really
Yes.
really interesting, and it's a good sign. And I think people appreciate it. I think you and I talked before. A lot of these maintenance people, engineers who train to build roads, pave roads, have been really interested in this and get a lot of satisfaction out of that program. Talk about that a little bit.
Yes, we are actually now we're adding some of the native wildflowers into our turf seed mixes. Maybe not necessarily in the mow zone, but we're actually making it a part of our construction projects now. I don't know how successful it'll be. It is actually surprisingly difficult to grow wildflowers, plant the plot and walk away from it. It doesn't, it takes a lot of maintenance to get them established. And oftentimes it just doesn't quite work out in the right of way. So we'll
Maintenance
see
in
how that
terms of
goes.
weeds? What is the maintenance about
Yes.
weeds or
Yes,
everything?
it's about weed competition. They require a lot of mowing, sometimes herbicide control of other weeds. It can be very labor intensive, and it takes a couple of years to get them established. Also, brush can outcompete them.
Right.
Yes.
So what else is keeping you busy in this front?
Well, I'm excited. I wanted to talk today I kind of wanted to highlight how many trees MDOT plants per year, because I think this is an area that folks may not recognize as, another source for pollinators and pollinator habitat. We do tree removals with our projects, and I know sometimes they can be controversial just because, it might look devastated at first, but we always plant things back. We mitigate for any removals that we do, and we try to do replacements at a 2-to-1 ratio if possible. So we did get some numbers. We do plant on average about 4,297 trees per year. So that's really an exciting number. And pollinators use our trees as habitat. They support thousands of species each year. And the other thing is many of them bloom before many of the wildflowers even start. So they're that early food source for pollinators.
So talk about some of those species, any that would surprise people, do you think?
I don't even know if folks know. I think, I don't know the exact number, but I think we have over 400 species of bees in Michigan. So I think that's a number that folks may not be aware of. And it supports, birds as well will pollinate. So just a variety of species. So
Would you include hummingbirds in that?
Yeah, I would. Those, I have taken photos of them in our Port Huron plots. They're real short sunflowers and wildflowers, and you can see the hummingbirds in there. So they definitely utilize. Yeah.
They're always fun to watch.
Yeah, they are.
So longer term, not just from the pollinator standpoint, but obviously trees are vital to our oxygen supply and to our fresh air. So
yes,
that's a huge factor and a reason why this is important to do, right?
Yes, definitely. Water quality, soil stabilization, they serve a whole host of different purposes for us. So it's always important for us to put trees back. And that's in my role, we make sure they go back on our jobs. Yeah.
So looking forward, you've got the trees and the wildflowers and the pollinators and the animal control. Is there anything else that's kind of on your future docket, in your mind that you would like to see happen in a longer timeline?
I don't think so at this point. I think I just am excited to get our grant underway and start through that process and see what the data tells us. I think that'll be exciting to see across the state where the hot spots are identified by species. And then from there, I guess following in Missouri's footsteps and trying to figure out how we're going to then implement that into our standard planning process. I think that'll be another huge undertaking and huge project.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think that highlights a very important thing, though, that you and your counterparts from other states, and this is all areas of the department, no matter what you're working on, there is, through the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, a number of ways to track best practices. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know that there might be a state that's already tried something and they've had success with it. And like you said, you can maybe learn from it, maybe learn that it wouldn't apply in Michigan, on a one-to-one basis, but there are things to be learned. And I think it's really important to have those peer exchanges and stay in touch with those folks.
Yes, and that's been really excellent. Missouri has also put me in contact with other groups and conferences that come up where they do presentations and others do presentations on the same topic. So I think just being plugged into that whole community will be really nice moving forward. And I definitely will not be reinventing the wheel. So that will be good.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Amanda. Thanks for what you do. I think it's the hidden work. A lot of people don't know that DOTs have people doing the things that you do, but I think it's a good thing that we do. So I appreciate you talking about it as always.
Yes, thanks for inviting me back again.
I'd like to thank you once more for tuning in to Talking Michigan Transportation. You can find show notes and more on Apple Podcasts or Buzzsprout. I also want to acknowledge the talented people who help make this a reality each week, starting with Randy Debler, who skillfully edits the audio, Jesse Ball, who proofs the content, and Jackie Salinas, who posts the podcast to various platforms and transcribes the audio to make it accessible to all.